Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Crystal Tang with Rio SEO, and I will be your moderator today. If this is your first time joining one of our webinars, we want to thank you for taking the time out of your day and hopping on with us. We do these monthly, so feel free to check our website and see what's coming up next. A few housekeeping items to go over while we still have attendees dialing in. Due to the size of the audience, we will keep attendees on mute. However, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the GoToWebinar chat box and we'll loop them into the conversation. If for some reason we don't get time to get to all the questions, we will follow up with you via email afterwards. We'll also be live tweeting throughout the webinar, so feel free to follow along or tweet at us with any questions at Rio_SEO. And then finally, we'll send out a recording of today's panel within 24 hours, so keep an eye out for an email from our marketing team. So as I said, I'm Crystal Tang, Director of Local Strategy at Rio SEO. I do want to welcome a couple experts we have on today's panel. We're very excited to have Kurt Craik, CEO and founder of Metrics Edge. Kurt, do you want to give us a little more background about your experience in the digital marketing realm?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kurt Craik, a leader of Metrics Edge. We're based in sunny Phoenix and enjoying the good weather that we're having right now. We focus on analytics and measurement as a priority strategy before we do any performance media. So we're very data centric. I've been in the space for longer than I want to mention, and appreciate having the opportunity on this.
Yes, thanks for joining us. We also have Mike Blumenthal, founding partner at GatherUp and co-founder of Local U. Mike, do you want to tell us a little bit about your history in local search?
Sure. So yesterday was National Curmudgeon's Day, so it's a big celebratory day for me. I am renowned as being the world's largest Google curmudgeon, and I wear that title proudly. Been in small business my whole life, family business, sweeping the floor, newspaper boy, crashed and burned numerous businesses before I got involved with the internet in 2001, and been involved in local search ever since. Just love the intersection of technology and small business, large business as it occurs in local search. I've been writing about it since 2006, and in that, with a number of partners, co-founded Local U, which is a digital training project for businesses and agencies, and also co-founded GatherUp, which is a customer experience reputation management platform based on the consulting work I'd done in local.
Awesome. And I had no idea what a curmudgeon was until I met you. So thank you for educating me about curmudgeons. And last but certainly not least, we have Lauren Abramson, Account Director and SEO Strategist at Rio SEO. Lauren has extensive experience working with Fortune 100 and 500 companies, as well as startups. Lauren, do you want to give us a little insight into how you are helping clients today achieve their local marketing goals?
Sure. So I extensively focus on analytics and making sure that reporting fits actionable opportunities for brands. I like to reframe what SEO means to people because I think there's still misnomers. I call it search experience and opportunities, which definitely changes how the landscape, it fits more with how the landscape is today. So just really helping clients really figure out the appropriate strategies and realistic strategies to be effective in today's crowded market and landscape.
Awesome. I like that. Search experience and opportunities. I'm going to have to remember that.
So Crystal, are you going to introduce your vast experience in local search as well?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Crystal, Director of Local Strategy at Rio SEO. I've been with the company for a little over 5 years. Everything to do with local. But prior to here, I actually worked as an e-com merchandise manager, where I saw kind of before my eyes where my role changed from creative, where I was working with magazines and getting placements and merchandising based on that, to tracking SEO conversions and which searches were coming into our website and not converting, and focusing my merchandising based on that. So it was really interesting and worked really well into a natural role here. And I just like it. I'm 100% left brain. I'm not super creative, so it actually worked well for me. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into local.
And I had
just
one thing about you, Crystal is a Google product expert in Google My Business, and one of the most knowledgeable people about bulk and bulk issues, bulk uploads. So if you really have a question about Google on that side, she's your person.
Thank you. Yeah, I try. I think with everything in Google and Google My Business, there's not a ton of documentation. And I find it just even more so when it comes to bulk and managing agencies. So I've definitely been through the ringer, and anytime I can help someone not struggle as much as I have, I'm always happy to. So thanks for saying that, Mike. All right, so today we are going to talk all about zero-click searches, what they mean for your business, and really how to look towards the future in a zero-click world. Really just kind of starting out, we want to make sure everyone knows what a zero-click search is. And we were chatting a little bit before this that sometimes the term zero-click is a little bit of a misnomer. Essentially, zero-click just means a user is not getting to your website. There was kind of this trend a couple years ago now that people were seeing traffic dropping, but not necessarily see a drop in customers coming through their front door. So it's kind of, misnamed, especially in when it comes to local, because there are actually a lot of clicks going on the knowledge panel. So today we want to make sure we're covering the rise of zero-click search. What are Google updates? What are featured snippets? The impact on organic and local SEO, and what it means for 2020 and beyond. So really quick here to show what a zero-click search is so everyone sees. There's an organic zero-click search as well as a local organic click search. An organic zero-click search is typically going to be returned in a featured snippet. So something that shows you the answer exactly whenever you are searching for a very specific query. So I'm looking for a recipe. Google's going to give you a pop-out, it's going to give you images, it's going to give you a ton of functions that gives you the answer. That means you don't need to click to that website to get it. A website may not necessarily see you in terms of traffic. Now for a local search, and this is really what I think we've seen a ton of information published on zero-click searches, and it doesn't necessarily translate into what this means for local. So we definitely want to have this discussion today and really highlight potential opportunities when it comes to zero-click and local. But Google's actually been delivering zero-click searches in local for years. And it's actually sometimes translated into more opportunity, not necessarily less. So something where there's a ton of features, you're searching for a restaurant, you're making a reservation, you're clicking to call, anything that you can do directly in Google without getting to the website is considered a zero-click search. So just keep this in mind as we kind of go through our conversation today. So really to just jump in, let's start with you, Mike. Why do you think there's been such an increase in zero-click searches? Is there anything really driving this and making this rise?
So local is sort of the canary in the coal mine of Google. What we're seeing as Google shifts towards the knowledge graph and answering questions, local has been at the forefront of that whole process. So we've been seeing this for a long time. And what we've been seeing is what's called immersive search. Google's trying to keep people on their site longer. Google is looking at transactional capabilities. They're looking to get people to immediately make the decision there. And they're looking at visual search as a way of increasing engagement and giving people the information they need right then and there very quickly without having to leave. So this has been going on, like I said, in local for a long time. And I think we're just starting to see more of it in broader areas. But as Google moves through the world of the knowledge graph, which is going to impact more and more areas of search, we're going to see more of these trends, more visual, more transactional, more immersive, i.e. more on Google than we've seen in the past. And not just in local, where we've been seeing it, like you said, for ever.
Yeah, for quite a while. So Lauren, what would you say this, kind of translate and communicates about consumer behavior, the delivery of information so quickly and readily?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's fairly obvious for people in the industry. People are more impatient, right? They want the information quickly, succinctly, and without additional effort. And so Google definitely pays attention to user behavior and shifts their structure and delivery of information as such. And so, right, zero-click search is being a big piece of that. I think that people want to, especially with longer tail terms, right, and how people have been searching very detailed throughout the years, right, people just want to get straight to the point more effectively and quickly. And as a result, with tweaks that Google has made, I think it in turn is this cyclical relationship where as a result of that, people become even more impatient, even if they weren't that way before, or requiring that instant gratification of information. And it's just that, system that I think we're adjusted to now because, right, consumer behavior has changed based on what Google was seeing and then how Google adjusted thinking that's what consumers wanted. And here we are.
Yeah, definitely. So what would you say in this for Mike, Lauren, Kurt, what do you think this says about Google and its relationship with kind of a brand's website or a business's website?
At the biggest level, Google still needs websites, even if they're going to convert on Google as a primary trusted source for data, all the data about the business. So businesses need to understand that their website may not be where the conversion takes place, but it is certainly where the best, most authoritative information about them in all their glory resides. And they need to, and in local anyways, it's still the second most common place where people convert. So it's still immensely critical, but it may be that the conversions are not occurring there as much as they used to. They're occurring on Google.
Yeah, it actually reminds me a little bit of when Facebook really started to take off. And a common question from clients was, do I need a website? Oh, Facebook is my website. I don't need a website. And I think everybody on this webinar probably would fervently disagree with that. And I think it's just another part of the evolution of the maturity of the industry, that your website will change the nature of how it engages the customer experience. But at the end of the day, the website still is your chance to talk about your brand. And your brand has to be number one in a world where, the zero-click pattern is happening. You have to have a brand. You have to have a business model that supports that brand. And what happens with the traffic is going to change from year to year.
I agree. So would you guys say that there's maybe industries that are more or less impacted by zero-click searches?
Yeah, David Mimet, ThriveHive did some interesting research on this sort of relationship. And at least in local, there are low knowledge industries and there's high knowledge industries. For example, it's a low cost consumer decision to pick up the phone and call a retailer and find out if they're halfway decent. So the conversion will occur on Google. But in terms of calling a lawyer, it's a much bigger decision. So we see in these high knowledge requirement industries, more people flowing through to the website before they make the final decision. Still, I think the majority is occurring on Google, even there, but there's more conversions on the website on a lawyer than say a retailer. So in local, we do see that, and it seems to break down based on consumer need for information.
Yeah, I think in the various industries and verticals I've worked in, I feel like I saw more zero-click searches is starting more so in the healthcare, right? That education, informational, especially in that journey stage of a consumer within Google and searches. So from there, right, I've seen that more so when people are looking for, let's say, ingredients in baby products, or if they're looking to see if there's been lawsuits with certain brands because of ingredients, right? I saw Google actively responding more so in the healthcare industry consumer side with knowledge or with featured snippets in that kind of capacity. So I've seen it there more so in just broad educational top funnel searches. And lately, right, we're starting to see that seep through quite a bit more. But from a non-local perspective and just a broader sense across various verticals, right, it was really just any industry, to Mike's point of high education, that really is having quite a bit more of opportunity or space in ranking for zero-click searches.
Yeah, and we use the word high education. Actually, one of our largest clients is a major education institution, and we're actually seeing it in education, where it's called a stealth application, where the pattern over the last several years in that industry is that students are no longer using the website of the universities to do their research. They're getting it offline from friends, word of mouth, referrals. And the first time the university is actually seeing that lead is when they actually apply to the website. So it's happening in education as well.
Yeah. So I know, Lauren, you touched on this a little bit. I want to just kind of, chat quickly, because I'm sure there's some people dialed in that are interested in the recent change to featured snippets. Maybe, Lauren, do you have an opinion about the recent change? And for anyone that's unfamiliar with it, essentially, I think it was last week, Google rolled out what they call deduping of the SERPs, which is any website that has achieved a featured snippet that will now count as first position, and that website will not show on the first page of results. So I know there's been a lot of people that talked about getting the featured snippet and then also getting that first or second organic result or blue link. But Google kind of rolled it out so that they deduped the results. But maybe Lauren, do you think this will really impact SEO strategy? What are your thoughts on that change?
I think there's a couple pieces to that I have a very strong opinion on. First and foremost is measurement. So maybe this is the time to mention it, maybe later on too, or it'll be repeated. But I still think, just from previous experiences, having to explain and educate senior leadership, right, C-suite level that are not digitally native, the value of the traffic coming from zero-click searches, even though they're seeing clicks decline on website, and how to translate that. It's a very difficult task that I haven't really seen done very seamlessly, because calculations and measurements are done very differently, right? Like, in their mind, how do you actually count that as an engagement when nobody's actually engaging with the content you're creating, because they're still so focused on the value of a website, which they should be. So I think from a measurement perspective, it is going to have an impact, because we are going to potentially see a decline in either, impressions, right, and potentially clicks, because not everybody reads the featured snippet and leaves Google, right, or does another search. Some people still continue to scroll down and take a look to see other highly authoritative sites for their query. And without that link being there, they miss the opportunity, and I feel much smaller percentage go to page 2 where the link now would actually live. So the measurement side, I think, is really going to be an interesting piece for a lot of SEOs in-house, vendor side, agency side, however it's going to be. I think that's going to be a complicated piece, and I think that over the next 6 months, there's going to have to be a really good in-depth conversation across a multitude of teams of, okay, now that we know this changes, how can we measure effectively? I think schema is going to become more and more important, and I think the relationships between development teams and SEOs are going to become more prominent, especially with the emphasis on schema and people associating schema and featured snippets. Because again, if that's the one way that you can potentially win, right? And then progressively thinking about voice search, that's the other side of it, right? So you're limiting the opportunity of 2 chances to 1, so it's become more competitive. And so a lot of, components would need to change.
Yeah, and I'll add that a lot of our clients, and I'd say in the last 2 years, when you look at Google Analytics and you use that as your only measurement of success in the organic channel, you're probably depressed. It's a rough report to look at. And when the leadership of your clients are trained to look at Google Analytics as their only measurement, as Lauren said, that's a difficult conversation, but we have focused on, I'd say for 2 years or more, training our clients to think differently about how success is measured. Because if you're just using Google Analytics, you're missing the boat.
Mike, did you have any thoughts on featured snippet gate?
Yeah, we need a drama at least once a week in our industry, and we got it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, we did have a question come in that says, with the change to featured snippets, you essentially aren't able to double dip. You can't get the featured snippet as well as the organic one. does that apply to paid search as well? So if you have a featured snippet, would that kick out your ad, or because someone's paying for that placement, they still could get both? Is anyone aware of that? I think it's still new, so I'm not sure that that's kind of been clarified, but that's, I mean, I imagine if it's a paid link that it wouldn't be impacted.
Yeah, the two worlds largely function independently, so one would think that they would still be able to get ad plus a snippet.
That's one thing that has survived all the changes over the years, is that paid and organic still, at least in theory, in the back end, are separate.
And to a large extent, you know, I mean, we're seeing 3, 4 paid at the top of the page. I mean, you got to scroll pretty far these days to get even to that, sometimes that featured snippet. So
yeah, I think like the original first blue link is now sometimes closer to the bottom of the page with all of the ads, the, you know, carousel elements.
Google local
I just want
services.
to, sorry, I just want to quickly add to that. So I've seen a lot of different searches where the featured snippet is, you're not going to see paid results for a good portion. So it could be considered a readjustment of what you want to do on your paid search side, where if you are seeing certain terms not performing as well as they used to, you probably should look into seeing if now you are ranking more for featured snippets, because that term, that association's there, right? And that could be a holistic approach to kind of readjust what your strategies are. But Google, right, is pay to play, and they will always try to figure out a way to get their revenue. So always assume that they are separate, but at the same time, there can be, I've seen it depending vertical, that, you know, paid search doesn't exist anymore and the featured snippet has replaced it.
That makes sense. So kind of jumping to a different topic, you know, with the understanding that Google owns a large percent of the market share of search, you know, over 90% in some cases, and users are finding all this information directly in the search as opposed to going to your websites. I think there's been some kind of reports and assumption that now maybe Google is your biggest competitor. And we touched on this a little bit about still the need to have your website. But Mike, what do you think here? Is it warranted to fear Google as a competitor, or what's your opinion in that case?
I don't know if you ever watched the movie Matilda with Danny DeVito.
Yes.
He says, "I'm big, you're little, I'm right, you're wrong." I mean, I frequently think that quote epitomizes the reality. Whether Google is evil or not is irrelevant. They have interests, and the interests are driven by their customers. They may or may not align with you. That being said, in local, you know, what we see is 60, 70, 80% of the low funnel KPIs, calls, driving directions, messaging, occurs on Google. And from a small business, a local business point of view, who cares? You know, a conversion is a conversion. So at this point in local anyways, Google has been sending the bulk of your digital traffic to you, and many businesses don't even know that's happening. You know, they don't know where their leads are coming from. But when you put in analytics to track it, it's coming from Google. So in local, it's hard to be angry with Google for sending leads.
Yeah. Kurt, what would you say, maybe how have you translated this for brands that are maybe wary of all of this information, you know, being surfaced on Google directly?
I repeatedly talk to them about their brand and their customer experience, and just focusing on word of mouth, relying on reviews, for instance. We've seen repeated cases where when the client really engaged the customer with a review, the rewards, not just online, you know, digitally, just the culture of the company changed. So I really try and get the client to focus more on what will drive the search than actually capturing the click.
You know, a good example I ran into locally was AMC. Where I live, there's only one movie theater. It's AMC, and they have 8 shows. And historically, before they were AMC, they were Carmike, and they gave their movies to Google to show in the knowledge panel. So I could quickly at home look up what was on and decide to go or not go. They've subsequently decided not to give that data to Google, and now I have to go to the AMC website, which is a terrible user experience. Hard to navigate, hard to figure out what the times are, hard to figure out what movies are showing. It's like, you know, a lot of these companies think that they're doing it right, and they're not from a customer experience point of view. So from a consumer point of view, I just assume Google give me the answer right away, like Lauren said, and screw the company website if they're going to keep messing with me because they think I might become some sort of loyalty customer. I just want to know when the movie's on, and they don't make that easy to happen. So to some extent, companies have themselves to blame that Google has sort of taken over this role of easy, simple, fast delivery of the information.
Yeah, I think, you know, if your customers are on Google, if that's the first interaction they're having with your brand, whether they're reading your reviews or looking for movie times or those elements, why would you not want to be there? Do you just magically think that they will be, you know, encouraged to click to your website and might find that because you have such a wonderful website design that it's going to be super simple and right there? I think Google's just historically done a better job of surfacing what a consumer needs. So I think, you know, definitely when it comes to local, I don't think it's necessary to consider them as a competitor. There's definitely, like Mike said, a ton of opportunity, and they're giving you a lot of leads. All right, so we did have a question come in, and we can kind of jump a little bit to organic strategy. You know, some users are wondering, what are some tactics to achieve a featured snippet? I know a lot of it has to do with content, and Lauren, you mentioned, you know, schema and aligning your dev and SEO teams, but any kind of quick tips on, you know, users that are trying to earn a featured snippet?
I mean, content structure is also a big piece of it. So, you know, paragraphs, bullet points, things like that, making sure your headers are structured appropriately on page, make it easy to read, make it quick to load on the back end, right? Like it's the first thing that can be understood and read from a consumer standpoint if someone was to go to your site. Those are things that, you know, I've deployed in the past that I've seen be effective. However, right, that's part of the total pie. So really just pushing through, it is the technical and the content symbiotically working together. Majority of the time, right? Like your site has to be in a solid state first and foremost. And I think people overestimate the confidence in their site because we're still focused a lot on design versus function. And I think as users, they, you know, change over time, we have to adjust to that. So quick, easy to digest information, adding the schema or microdata on the back end is really the key component. So there's always a ton of roadblocks internally, but there are ways to oversimplify and make it easier for teams to get to a point very quickly to implement that and test that out and confirm for yourself.
Does the FAQ, it's either FAQ or snippet? I mean, is FAQ a path to this in organic? The FAQ schema as a way to get that higher visibility.
Yeah, I mean, Kurt, Lauren, do you have any familiarity with FAQ schema? I know that's been kind of an initial, there were changes that rolled out in the last couple of months to it, but I know there's a lot of schema and featured snippets that exist without FAQ, but any thoughts or opinions on FAQ schema as a quick win?
Yeah, I wish you'd come back in 2 to 3 months. We just implemented it on a client, and we can tell you what we found.
Perfect. We'll look out for that study from you.
That's right.
Awesome. All right. So knowing that businesses and users are not always getting to a brand's website, what are maybe, you know, Mike, Kurt, some kind of thoughts on creating that consumer journey that still speaks to the brand's voice, whether it's local or organic? I know, Kurt, you mentioned reviews being a really important element to make sure that's surfaced top level if a user may never get to your website.
Yeah, no, I that's exactly what I would answer to that question. It's you know, the experience and then letting the customer do the talking for you is going to drive the search. And then, you know, whether the click comes to your website or through a GMB or even a Facebook page or wherever it might go, you know, focus on the experience first, and you know, the click will come to, and Mike's been saying that the click's going to come to you in some form. It may come in a call, it may come in a post on Facebook, who knows? But that's why I've been saying focus on measurement and experience. And Facing Google makes you grade really fast.
I would add on the review front that it's not just reviews at Google that we're talking about. It's reviews and recommendations at Facebook and at Yelp and at Glassdoor and Indeed, that your brand needs to tell a consistent story, an honest, consistent story, because these days you're essentially co-telling your brand story with your consumers, and you don't know what they're going to be searching for, and the story needs to be broad so that wherever they look to your brand. And in local, we've seen this a lot, where on a brand search in local, the whole front page, Google gave extra bumps to sites that had reviews on them. So what you're looking for in that situation is a consistent story across all those sites. You don't want to be a 2.5 at Yelp and a 4.5 at Facebook, right? You want a consistent brand story in the reviews at multiple review sites, because even Glassdoor is starting to play a role in this. The second is imagery. Given that Google is moving towards these zero-click opportunities, imagery becomes absolutely critical to put you in a better competitive position than your competitors. And imagery should be, and you're seeing this, even in the little links that they show under your website, they may be showing images there. Site links now have images. Images are attached Google is using AI to see if the image on the page matches the query, and in mobile, they're showing that image in the mobile results. So images are a huge way to create a competitive advantage of you over somebody else in this context, so that you have a visual cue that stands out.
I agree. I think if you are a small business or a multi-location business, if someone's going to interact and see you on Google or Yelp or wherever it is, I think you should try and do everything available to you, whether it's filling out your menu, filling out your images, adding a Google post, that they would have a similar reaction to when they walk through your front door of the store or interacted with the professional that they're booking an appointment with. I think as a business, it is in your best interest to try and communicate that on a digital aspect in terms of, publishing your information on Google. If you've got elements, I think you should fill it all out. I don't think there's any reason to not.
To the point of aligning your imagery with the Google search results, Google's AI has gotten very sophisticated. So if you've got good images on a page around a topic and the images relate to the topic, Google is more likely to show those as thumbnails in the mobile search results. I mean, they've gotten very sophisticated at understanding that an image of a ring is a ring, and if the search is for a ring, they're going to show the mobile search result with that ring image, to the point where they don't even look at alt tags that much, where they don't need them to understand what an image is about. So I think that requires a deep thought between what your pages are about and how the images reflect that content on your pages, and then how those images are delivered or seen in the Google, particularly on mobile, particularly with thumbnails.
Yeah, no, I agree. Outside of images and kind of those, any other elements that have been really successful kind of in terms of optimizing your GMB knowledge panel?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the GMB knowledge panel is a reflection of all of your information from around the internet. So optimizing every aspect of it, that includes reviews are on the web, meaning it shows you 3 review sites in addition to Google. That could be Facebook, it's not going to be Yelp or TripAdvisor, but it could be Wedding Wire and The Knot. Filling out Q&A and doing your own Q&A so that you can tell your brand story in the knowledge panel through Google's Q&A, sort of replacement for FAQs. And it's back to reviews also. Google is using reviews to answer queries now. They're using Google Q&A to answer queries. This new query carousel is very prominent, shows up above your address, above your phone number. So if there's an intent-driven query in local and they click through to your business profile and you have reviews, Q&A, and posts around that topic, that's what Google's going to show. So you want to be sure that these other tools that Google gives you aligns with your primary search goals.
Yeah,
both
no,
at an image level and a content level.
Yeah, I think a couple elements is, one is not living within your GMB UI or API or wherever you submit data, but also looking at it from a consumer's perspective. Because like as you said, there's going to be elements Google surfacing. They're going to highlight reviews. They're going to highlight other elements that are not in control within GMB about your business, and you should be aware of them. I think, Mike, you recently reminded me about that query carousel that displays that looks like it's a part of your knowledge panel, but it's essentially information pulled from other elements. And it's very prominent. So definitely just doing brand searches, doing queries of yourself and also others in the industry. Like, look what others are doing, if they're doing it better, so you can kind of set your goals. And even go outside industries. You don't always have to stay in your industry. You're going to have different elements, but look at other, prominent brands. Obviously, look at Barbara Oliver. That's what I always do. I think that's probably the most optimized listing I've ever seen.
Well, if you're getting engaged anytime soon, you can also buy a ring from her.
But that's always a great example to take a look at, just to really see what your options are from a GMB perspective.
What's interesting in that context, though, is just that Google will switch up the GMB primary images based on the query, which really means you've got to think through which images you're showing there.
Yeah, they're doing that with images. I've seen them like highlight different reviews based on that, highlight different content of post, change the category that's displayed, essentially adjusting everything in their power based on the user's query if they believe that it's relevant. So that's always something to keep in mind as well. I was going to say, Kurt or Lauren, anything else to kind of add about, GMB knowledge panel optimization?
I think if you're looking from a business headquarters perspective, just really kind of narrowing down, I think it's an important piece to coordinate with your PR and communications department and your social team from a social listening perspective to see what kind of content is going to be portrayed about your brand, per week. Is there something big coming up? Like, is there a CEO change? Is there a holding company change? Is there anything of that sort, and articles that are going to slowly, or not slowly, but quickly flood the market that could potentially change a headquarters knowledge panel location for listing? Because I find that those function sometimes a little bit differently based on how people search. You either get like a straight knowledge panel or with a location and listing. But I think it's a great coordination and understanding of collaborative efforts between various teams, and how, to your point, looking at queries, right, especially from a branded perspective, how are those being represented, right? And trying to look at different tools to understand and tweak as a result. So if maybe certain keywords that we weren't thinking about that we wanted to add to a description or add as a category, like those can come up in those kinds of spots, just through various analyzations and coordination. So.
I would add, sorry, Kurt, one thing, which is to be aware if you've got a Wikipedia article, it is likely to show, and the first 300 characters that Wikipedia article are going to show. So you really need to monitor your Wikipedia page to be sure that it reflects ideal content about your brand. Go ahead, Kurt, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add actually something even a little less about the metadata of the panel, but actually as it relates to local, educating your client as to how Google associates locality with the actual panel. So we have a client who's got 100 locations all over the Southeast, and we have spent a decent amount of time educating them on how Google chooses their matching, so that when they're deciding where to actually locate, that becomes part of the calculus. You'd be amazed at how much the wheels start turning when you educate a client as to all the way upstream when they actually are making choices about where they have an office.
Yeah, I know I've heard that a couple of times, that like there's some local challenges that are only solved if you were to pick up and move your office to a different location. So I think that's a huge educational component, from a brand perspective of getting your local impact upstream. Like, will this rebranding negatively impact us? What does this term mean? What types of queries are going to be returned if we change our name to something like this? And will it cause brand confusion? Those types of things.
To Kurt's point about location, I mean, in the storage industry, there was this trend when Google first, in the in the 80s for it to be located on the edge of town because you could rank. And what happened when Google changed the local algorithm, those folks that chose those cheaper, out of the way places really took a hit. And those that had chose high density locations benefited. So the whole industry has shifted towards Kurt's strategy of analyzing where people are actually searching and buying and using the services. I mean, it's industry changing in some ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, it's just nice to have the client actually learn from you and make changes to the way they operate based on things that we provide them.
No, that's awesome. All right, so we are up on time. We've got a couple questions we didn't get to, so we will follow up on those via email afterwards. I want to say thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thanks for joining us. And like I said, we will follow up with the recording of the webinar shortly after this.
And I hope everybody celebrated National Curmudgeon's Day yesterday with me.
Yeah, you're no curmudgeon, Mike.
Oh, you don't know me, Kurt. I am really a curmudgeon, and I wear it proudly.
Awesome. All right, thanks all. Happy belated Curmudgeon Day.
Thank you.
Bye.